Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Texas Outlaw Running Talk Show. This is, I believe, episode 25. I don't want to be wrong. It could be 26, one of the two. And this episode, we have James Robert. He just finished the Arkansas Traveler 100. And on the show, we actually get to hear about that experience, how he trained for it. He's also a chef and owner of his own restaurant. That's actually a really nice and big restaurant here in Texas. And he's a Texas runner. And so we're getting back to the roots here. And I know recently our episodes have been kind of different as far as the Texas Outlaw Running Talk Show, but we're going to get back to interviewing people about their races, their life, their training, things like that. And so we're going to get back on track with the shows going towards that direction. Real quick, before this episode starts, we have a Patreon. And if you click the link below that says Patreon, there's a link down there. If you click that, you can become a Patreon member. And by becoming a Patreon member, it helps keep this show literally up and running. And if it wasn't for our Patreon members, this show wouldn't be able to uphold itself. And all of that goes right back into the show. And so if you guys want to support, click the link below. And one more thing before we get to this episode. Hundreds of you listen to these episodes, and we don't have a lot of ratings on Apple Podcast or Spotify. So if you're listening, please, I ask that you can just leave a rating and let people know what you think about this podcast. And this helps get it out to more people, and more people are able to listen to the show. And so that's enough of that. Here's James Robert. So whenever I was looking at your Instagram, I had noticed that you are an owner of, it looks like a restaurant. What is that restaurant called?
It's called Fix Southern House, and it's in downtown Austin, corner of 5th and Nueces. We opened going on 8 years ago.
Sweet.
Christmas Eve 2014, which was a strange day to open, but we needed to do it the second we were ready to do it. So that's what it turned.
Cool, man. So what made you want to start that business? I see that you're a chef also. And so what made you kind of want to get into all that?
Well, kind of struggled to find my niche in college. High school zipped by and didn't really have an idea of what I wanted to do. Got into college. I was born and raised in Louisiana, so I was at LSU. Spent a lot more time, nightlife, hanging out, partying, than kind of, putting my head down and getting to work. And I just really didn't know where I was headed. All the while, washing dishes, prepping, working in kitchens, and that's what I loved, but I just never really saw it as a viable career option until one day I found myself working for this formally trained chef, and I was complaining right about college and not fitting in and not really spinning my wheels. So he said, have you ever thought of doing this? You should. You're good. And after that statement, I literally never thought of anything else as a career ever again. Like, that's all it took, just someone saying, like, go and do this, man, like, you're good at it. So I started researching culinary schools, worked for other people for a long time. And when I had the opportunity to break off, do something on my own, which was Fix, jumped at the chance, man. And Austin is just such a fantastic city to be in, be a business owner in. And, restaurant scene is really, really great. We're spoiled in a lot of ways. So, hopefully Fix fits right in. So,
yeah, that's really unique, man. Don't y'all have 2 locations, or is it just one?
Yeah, one here in Austin. Like I said, we're coming up on 8 years. Second one in Fort Worth, coming up on 5 years. And the cool thing is, both of those towns are awesome running communities. So I go and spend time in Fort Worth, checking in on that restaurant, and run along the Trinity Trail. The trailhead is just a quarter mile from the restaurant there, and then of course Austin, unmatched. Like, the running community, incredible.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, there's a lot of I would say really well-known runners in the Austin area and even Houston area. Those seems to be like the runner hubs almost. You don't really see, I mean, Dallas does have a lot of runners, but you don't really see any I guess recognizable figures in the running community from Dallas area. And so, yeah, definitely some good spots. And I wanted to know, how did you get started running? How did that all come about?
Well, my dad was a runner back in the late 70s and early 80s,
Yeah.
and I remember him always training for a race. Back then, like, the half marathon distance didn't even exist, right? That's relatively new. So he had a ton of marathons under his belt, and a bunch of 10 milers. That was like his sweet spot. Like 10 miles was what he liked to race. So anyway, he formed a little run club in my small town in Louisiana. A bunch of his buddies, so they'd take us out like the little kids, the sons, right? So we jog, jog behind our dads, and it was a cool thing, like to experience with him, putting in those miles. And then in high school, ran distance events and track and then cross country. But I never really loved it. I played football too, and football and cross country kind of coincided. So my effort and my focus would go into the football training. And then, after the Friday night game was a Saturday morning cross country meet. So I'd, be tired and banged up and bruised and,
Oh yeah.
limp, limping slightly. So, unfortunately back then the running never really took the forefront. Looking back now, obviously I'd change it maybe because I certainly didn't have a future in football. Um, uh, and then, I kind of like alluded to, my partying ways in college. It's like kind of all physical fitness and healthy movement kind of like fell by the wayside for a long time. I kind of lost all that for a while. And then when I kind of got back to, some semblance of fitness and taking care of myself, I was just hitting the gym. Like I wanted to, lift weights and, muscle mass and like, all this stuff. So even then, running was kind of like secondary. Always kind of had a toe in the water, but I didn't really get back into it and like kind of adopt a runner lifestyle until about 7 years ago. Well, maybe if we're about to celebrate 8 years at Fix, about 9 years ago, I guess,
Gotcha.
because I was kind of trying to be a runner when I was opening that restaurant, and it was hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did you move to Texas?
Well, said that I went to college at LSU.
Yeah.
There when I was a junior, went to culinary school in Burlington, Vermont. But when I was at LSU, a couple of our buddies came here to UT. So we had Baton Rouge and Louisiana friends here in Austin. So we'd road trip, and this was like perfect trip. Get to Austin, like it was like the unknown, and like our buddies were here, so we got like a local's perspective. And I just fell in love with this town like way back then, like
Yeah.
way back then. So when it came time to come out of culinary school, and this was like 1990, 7, wait, maybe 1990, 1999. I don't know. Sorry, late 90s. I just needed to pick a place. The good thing about, restaurant industry, I'm going to start at the bottom anywhere I go, culinary degree or not. So all I had to do was pick a town. And we were kind of like looking at the, map or thinking about places, rattling off places. And it's like, how about Austin? Austin is really cool. It's got a lot going for it. So, that's all it took. Moved here in 1999. I was here until '03. I moved to the Phoenix Scottsdale area for a job, but that was like only a 4 year stint. And I was like biding my time, man. Like Austin already had its hooks in me.
Yeah.
So it was like, how can I get back there? How quickly can I do it? Let me get back home because Austin is where I want to be. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't blame you. I listen to Nick Bear quite a bit in his podcast, and he talks a lot of good about um, Austin in that area. And so I've heard good things. I've been to there a few times, but I don't think I've ever actually just visited the city. And so I've heard a lot of good things about it. And also, I wanted to know when during this process, whenever you decided to open up your restaurant, what did that look like? How did you I just want to know, like, as a business owner myself, how did you even build that and how did it come about?
Well, first of all, I found myself in a fortunate position because I'd worked for some restaurateurs who I consider some of the best out there. It's a couple of dudes. They're a two-man team, uh, Guy Villavasso and Larry Foles, and they've developed some of the best known concepts in Texas. Like they're the guys behind Zite House Grill. They're behind Eddie V's Seafood. They're heavy investors in Hop Dottie, the burger joint. Right now, they're developing this place called ATX Cocina. They've got Jay Carver Steakhouse. Just all these amazing concepts, right? So me, a young guy right out of culinary school, like working my way up the, culinary ladder, became a sous chef pretty quickly. They let me be a, executive chef of one of their spots, and then they would just kind of like deploy me Like, you want to go to Scottsdale? Sure, I'll go anywhere you want to go. I'll do anything you need me to do. Like, that was the type of like ambitious dude I was, because I felt like I wasted all this time in college. I was really, really ready to get something moving. So anyway, long story short, worked for those guys for 15 years. My tenure was matched by this other gentleman named Keith House. Eddie V's was the company that we oversaw, me as a culinary director, Keith House as director of front of house operations. It had taken a while to develop, get into those positions, but he and I had been working together for our entire tenure. Um, Eddie V's was sold to the biggest restaurant company in the world, Darden Restaurants Incorporated. They own Red Lobster and like
Gotcha.
what's the other one, Olive Garden. So no big deal. Whatever. We got new owners. Like, let's learn a thing or two. Like, it's a corporate behemoth. Maybe not the environment that we like came up in and grew to love, but like, let's learn a thing or two. This could be educational. So we made a commitment to be there for 1 year, and at the end of the 1 year, we had interest like behind us to like go and do something on our own. So found myself in a position of I had this like you know culinary and restaurateur education by these two guys that I like respected more than anybody ever, and then B, unknowingly, I was working beside my future business partner for the last 15 years. So he and I just like very gracefully exited together. Like the people that we spoke to and like, put in that notice to were a little disappointed. A decade and a half of work each, and we like pulled the plug and said, we're going to do our own thing. But that's the way that it works. In the business
Cool.
world, it's like they wished us well. Um, so yeah, that's what it looked like. And then, Keith and I just did the thing, man. Like, went and built something of our own, and like just incredibly grateful and like incredibly proud.
Yeah, yeah, and what y'all's built, from what I see on social media and online, y'all have built something really good, and it's very professional. And so, I just want to compliment you guys on that, and y'all have done a really good job on that. And so, what was that like opening, and starting a business and also running? Because those two things seem very difficult to do simultaneously.
They really, really are. First of all, with Eddie V's in those 15 years, Keith and I together had opened, I don't know, 12 restaurants, a couple of different concepts, three concepts. Eddie V's, a spinoff called Wildfish, a spinoff called Roaring Fork. So that was one of the cool things about my job with those guys. Like, it was always a little bit different. Like, it was dynamic. And like, sure, I was comfortable in that, like, I had a paycheck and like I could count on things. But it's like they mixed it up, man. And they like kept me like adaptable and fluid and versatile. And those are things that you need in the restaurant industry in general. But then, like, fast forward, like, a couple of decades, find ourselves in a pandemic. I'm sure we'll touch on that, later
Oh
on, but
yeah.
it's like we needed to be like completely adaptable, like be ready to change like on a dime every day if we needed to. Anyway, opening all those restaurants put me in a good position to like know what it took. So I had this sense of confidence, but opening one on my own where the buck stopped with me, even though I had Keith right by my side, I mean, it was like the hardest thing I've ever done. Like, hands down, the most difficult thing that I've ever done in my life. There was, I mean, at some point I was working 115 hours a week,
Wow.
and looking forward, I couldn't envision a scenario where it was not going to be that way.
Yeah.
And it was just, just making peace with it. Saying to myself, like, if I want to do this, I'm going to do whatever it takes to build it. And that's where I was, and that's what was needed at the time. And of course, it didn't last forever. I mean, it felt like it did for a while. So obviously, when I'm working 115, there's no running. I remember I was looking back on my Instagram at some point, and I want to say that it was 3 months after we opened the doors. I posted a little run. It was like, a 10K or something super slow or something like that. But it's like that to me was like the hugest victory, because like I can finally get back to doing something that like clears my head, puts me in a better mental place, makes me a better boss, all the things that I needed to do for myself. I was kind of like getting back to. So it took a while, but I got back there.
Oh yeah. And one thing I wanted to kind of add to what you were saying is that it seems like a lot of entrepreneurs, when they first start, there's like this, I guess you call it like a grind phase, to where you work your tail off as many hours a day as you can for the first however long just to get it up and started and running. I see that as a common theme amongst a lot of entrepreneurs that own brands, have brands, and just to get that brand on a solid foundation, I feel like that's just kind of what it takes. And
Yeah,
so, yeah,
I agree.
I definitely see where you're at with that. And so, as your business continued on and your running continued, what did that development look like in your running and alongside your business as well, and managing the two and balancing them?
Well, I guess the thing that stands out the most is just, like I think everybody, regardless of, what they find themselves doing, running a podcast, running a restaurant, like owning, whatever it is, owning a bakery, it's like work-life balance is something that is needed. And a lot of times it's, you chase it, you chase it, you chase it, and you kind of like end up in a position where you're kind of settling,
Yeah,
for whatever. A couple of things that we touched on, like, I just knew with certainty that I had to put in the work if I wanted my restaurant to be successful. The failure rate in the restaurant industry is astronomical because people get into it for the wrong reasons, or they don't know the amount of work that it's going to require, or whatever. We knew all those pitfalls. We knew what was ahead of us. Didn't make it any easier, like not one iota. But, that's where we were. It's what I chose. Like we choose this path. Now we got to accept the hardships. I read that somewhere and it resonated with me. But it's like, it was like just like you said, grinding, 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 building that foundation to where I can kind of like step out, seek what brings balance to my life. And running was one of those things. It kind of took signing up for a race. I remember that. I have I have three sisters, two of whom run as well. We try to run a race together each year, one time a year, and it's just, I mean, that's like pretty special. So they wanted to do this fundraising effort in Memphis for the St. Jude's Children's Hospital. So amazing fundraising effort, like truly worthwhile cause. I get to do a little road trip, take a little trip with my sisters and run a race. And I just remember not having been signed up for anything up until that point. I had been doing some running because the workload had kind of like gotten to such that I could do a little bit of it. But I remember, putting my name on the dotted line, hitting enter or register or whatever, and then it was like a switch flipped, and all of a sudden it's like your mind kind of like gives you the opportunity that you need. All of a sudden, like I had a little bit more time in the day just because I was looking at things a little differently.
yeah,
It's like your priorities change when you like commit yourself to a goal. Your perspective changes a little bit, I think.
yeah,
And like that's kind of what it took for me to truly get to the other side of things.
yeah. And it was that kind of like one of the big starting points for you was signing up for that race. Is that what really kind of boosted your path in your journey in running?
I think so. To tell you the truth, though, I don't consider myself much of a racer. Like that is, a hugely personal thing. It's like I
Yeah,
know people that race every weekend, and that's phenomenal. I remember I don't know how often my dad raced, but he had a chest of drawers like a bureau, and one enormous drawer was full from one side to the other with race T-shirts. Like if these things still existed, they would be the most beautiful vintage race shirts ever. All these like small town Louisiana festivals with like a 10-mile run or a
it's
10K
awesome.
run. Awesome. They're like long gone, and like I lament the fact that like I don't have access to these things. But anyway, my point is yeah, like racing, it's just hugely personal. So for me, like I find myself interested maybe twice a year, big efforts, to where like it requires a training block, and I commit myself fully, and I'm looking at like a 16-week process or something like that. Um, so yeah, I don't really know if that answered your question. Sorry, I
Oh
went off
yeah.
on a
Yeah.
tangent with the t-shirts, but
Hey, it's all right. This show's all about tangents and just hopping off from one tangent to another. And so
yeah,
I'm gonna continue your tangent now. Um,
sure.
but so honestly, I feel like personally, and I want to hear what your thoughts are on this, but I feel like if you sign up for races all the time and you're running all these races and you're having all these experiences, like you said, that's great. But I feel like if you really choose a race that's going to be very memorable and you're never going to forget for the rest of your life. And you do those once a year, twice a year, and you really kind of space them all out. I feel like personally, you would have more of a memorable experience looking back at your life when you're older, looking back at those times, than if they were all kind of squashed together and you did one every other weekend. What do you think about that?
I think there's certainly validity to that. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think I could argue that point. You know, like maybe a counterpoint would be I'm missing possible opportunities for memorable experiences in the races that I don't sign up for. So that would be the only like debate that I could make. But you know, like I said, it's hugely personal, and like
Yeah.
one of the reasons why it's that way for me is um, the race experience is great, but I love the training,
Mm.
you know, and I'll be out there running regardless of if I'm registered or not. Like the intensity changes, the outlook of it changes, like the rigidity of the schedule obviously changes because I want to perform well. But man, I'm going to be logging the miles regardless. You know what I mean? And like to tell you the truth, it's like after a training block, I look forward to just getting out there and running, going for a jog if I want to, speeding it up when I want to, like going where I want to, like running from home, you know, all that stuff. Like that's cool. So if I'm constantly like looking toward the next race, it's like I'm constantly on this schedule that I need to adhere to, you know, or like I'm going to hear it from somebody, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway,
When did you hear about trail and ultra running? When did that get on your radar?
well, so it's cool because it's kind of all tied together. Um, I had a gentleman working for me at Fix, and you know, like I said, like I had run, then I hadn't run, and then I was trying to be a runner, and I was like trying to, you know, slowly becoming a runner. All of a sudden, I had this dude, kid, it's not a kid, a man, a dude, work for me. His name is Jeff Brown. Still very, very good friend of mine. He's a chef here in Austin as well. He is the executive chef of a Chinese place called Old Thousand. So he was working for me at Fix as a cook. And I'm pretty sure how it went was he just asked for a long weekend off. And I was like, you know, sure, man. Like, there's not much going on. What do you have going on? And he said, well, I have an ultra marathon. And dude, it wasn't even on my radar in any way. Like in any way, I don't know how I knew so little, but it was like I said, "So what is that? Like, explain that to me." He was like, "Well, it's a 100-mile trail race," and I just remember like being that guy who asked all of those questions. It's
Yeah.
like 100 miles. Like, what do you mean? Like, do you stop? Like, do you sleep? And like all the questions that everybody asks about ultras.
Oh,
I was that guy in that moment. So I just remember like fascination doesn't even begin to describe like what was going on in my head. It was like I just I couldn't even wrap my head around it. So he's a great runner. He's a really really great runner to this. You know, still he finished and he did really well. So when he came back, I had about a million questions, and although at that point I wasn't even a trail runner, I was more of a road guy. I was nowhere near ready to embark on something like that. But dude, the seed was planted, and to me, like the way that my mind works is like I'm a little bit obsessive compulsive.
oh,
So once it was in there, man, there was just no getting it out. So it was only a matter of time, and it took a couple of years before I, you know, took the plunge. But dude, it was going to happen, you know, from that point, like it was a certainty.
yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah, I would even say same. I kind of had a similar experience as far as I heard about it, and then I was instantly intrigued and kind of like almost went all in on the idea of it. It's fascinating. These guys running in the mountains for 100 miles, like that's amazing. And some people you tell that to, and they're like, oh, that sounds miserable, but I don't. I can't see it that way, you know.
yeah,
And
no,
so yeah, the experience and that you get from a 100 mile race and even just watching them. Like I remember hours and hours watching them on YouTube, documentaries. There's such a fascination to it. And so whenever you had that moment, what did it look like after as far as your running? Did you sign up for a local trail race to see what it's all about? What'd you do?
I started to kind of like investigate our trail system here in Austin.
Yeah.
I'd get out and I bought a pair of trail shoes like not long after. And then, we have a green belt here in Austin, the Barton Creek Green Belt, and it's a system of trails that you can get 20 plus if you want. And there's some technical aspects. There's some vert, and there's like some, the rocky Texas terrain, which we, all know and love.
Right.
But, my point is you can get out there and run as long as you want. So started to dabble on, with that a little bit. Um, in between that time and my first trail race or ultra, there were some road races, did a couple of halves, some 10 milers here in Austin. So I didn't jump immediately into trail and immediately into ultra, but I just knew that I wanted it at some point. I'm not sure how long after his 100, but basically in 2019, Jeff, that same guy, this young lady named Britt, and myself were in a group text.
Yeah.
And she had drank, it was one evening, and she had a couple of glasses of wine. So she was a little tipsy. And she sent a screenshot of an entry for Bandera 100K. So I'd heard of this race and I knew that it was a challenging one. And she said, wine plus searching, trail races is no bueno or something like that. So
Yeah.
she just like signed her life away, right? So minutes later, Jeff sent a screenshot. He had entered. Like he wasn't going to let her have all the fun. So, but at that point, I'd never done an ultra.
Yeah.
And, starting with Bandera, first of all, and 62 miles, second of all, because they were doing 100K. If I signed up, I wasn't going to do 50K or 25K. Like I was going to go all in and do that with him. So anyway, it took me like a couple of days. At one point, I was like, Jeff, can I do this? If you say yes, I'll sign up. He was like, James, isn't that the fun part? Like, get out there and find out, man. Like, I'm confident in you, but you got to find out. So then I signed up and we all did it together and it was awesome. And that was my first ultra. Yeah.
Sweet. That's awesome. That's sweet, man. And during that time, 2019, you did that, and then COVID hits, right? So what does that look like with your life, like with everything? What did that look like?
Um, Getting back into the restaurant a little bit more. I'm a hands-on guy. Like I'm in the restaurant anyway. But when COVID happened, we had to adjust. Like all the things that I said before, we had to adapt. We had to adjust. We had to be very fluid. We made it a point to not let anyone go. Obviously, when we had to close the restaurant for dine-in, that means no front of the house servers and things like that. But I kept my cooks working as long as I possibly could, and I never like let anybody go. So work was there if they felt comfortable in coming, but it meant a way more hours than I was used to because I just had to be there a little bit more. So my running suffered a little bit, but I just want to backtrack just slightly. Just prior to COVID, I guess in late 2018, maybe. So, about a year and a half before COVID, a restaurant right down the street from mine, I'm on 5th and Nueces downtown in Austin, on 5th in Colorado, just 4 blocks up, Commodore restaurant opened up. And this is like an interior, high end Mexican place. And it was opened by my friend, Philip Spear, who's the owner and chef of that place. While he was opening his restaurant, and it's the same for everybody. You open a restaurant, you're married to it. You're joined at the hip to it. Like you can barely get paroled out of it. Like he's experiencing the same thing that I did like 4 years prior, right? He's in there around the clock. He is not gonna like fall into the pitfall that I did and just like not see the light of day. So once a day, every single day, while opening that restaurant, he and a handful of his people, whoever wanted to go with him, broke out of the restaurant, got outside, and went for a little jog in downtown Austin. So then they started taking selfies, posting them on Instagram, hashtag Commodore Run Club, but it was like in jest. It wasn't even serious. But anyway, meanwhile, people like me, who are also a chef, who know these guys and they're all my buddies, I'm already running, but it's like I want people to run with, and I want to run with you guys. You guys are cool. So I message or comment on the post like, how do I join? He's like, James, just show up, man. Like, we'd love to have you. So it was only a matter of time. Like 3 weeks later, my schedule kind of cleared, and I joined them. That we run Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and still to this day, like that's my crew. That's my club. So anyway, that was crucial during COVID because like we're a small club, So we never were worried about, being super spreaders or, any of that terminology that people used. Like we felt safe, and, we were outside and we were exercising and we were keeping our lungs, healthy. And like, those are the kinds of things that we thought that we needed to do. And like, we've been down the road with like no physical activity, and like mental health suffers and we don't want to go there. So, we kept at it. So that was a big part of COVID for me. And that was a positive, huge positive.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, that's really neat to hear the story of the little run club that y'all got up and going. And so how many people are in that run club right now?
I think our core group is about, I'd say 20 to 25. And there's just always people that kind of like filter in and out. And that's cool. It's like new faces, and we're very, very inclusive. You don't have to be fast. It's okay to be slow. You can be fast. Sometimes we get out there and, we're feeling speedy and we race. Other times it's just all about conversation and connection and laughs, but it's like we want everybody who wants to come out and run with us to run with us. A lot of us are restaurateurs or in the service industry, but we're not specific to that. A lot of us are in the recovery community. Also, I didn't really touch on that earlier, but I did talk about the partying at LSU. Came to a head at some point. Anyway, some of us are in the recovery community. It's certainly not specific to that. Like what we say is like we want to surround ourselves with cool people and connect with people who want to get out and like move their bodies in a healthy way. Philip Spear phrased it pretty perfectly. In a restaurant, going into an individual shift or service, you have these meetings, and they're called pre-shift meetings. All restaurants have them. You talk about highlights in the night, what's coming up, what's featured off the menu, like things that you're short on, like all the things that pertain to that shift. The flip side of that is the post shift meeting. That usually takes place at a bar. You got a bunch of servers and bartenders, pockets lined with cash from their tips, a bunch of cooks that just put in an 8 to 10 hour shift. They're sweaty and gross. They're looking for a couple of beers. So late nights, bad habits, lots of drinking, unhealthy foods, going to sleep late, having to wake up the next morning or day and do the whole thing over again. So we're getting into this vicious cycle. He said what Commodore Run Club is up to is shifting that post shift mentality. So our post shift is syncing up at 10 a.m., going for a run, sharing with each other like movement of body in a healthy way. So, I thought it was perfect, and I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, I actually I worked in the restaurant industry for a little bit, coming to college, and I was a bartender, and so I know what it's like whenever the restaurant closes and we're counting the tips and everybody's getting their drinks
That's
and all that. And so yeah, that's really cool that y'all y'all incorporated that. And what I'm kind of learning in school right now is that the healthier your workers are, the people that work for you, the better everybody's going to be as far as their hospitality towards customers, their service, things like that. And so there's a lot
definitely.
of good stuff in that. So I kind of want to get into the core of the episode because a lot of people are listening. They're listening for next year's Arkansas Traveler, or they're listening after the race to see if maybe you talk about them if you ran into them on the trail or something. And so what made you want to sign up for the Arkansas Traveler 100? And yeah, just tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. Well, I mentioned the Bandera 100K.
Yeah.
Um, a buddy of mine is the assistant race director for this small race company called Ultra Expeditions.
Oh yeah.
Also, company, yeah, my buddy Florian, he put on a race and he, built it from the ground up, designed the course, put on the whole thing. It was called Austin Falls Ultra, and this was back this year, like beginning of this year though. So I ran the 50K of that. It was out at McKinney Falls State Park. That was a really, really great race for me. That was one of my best efforts. And then, I have road marathon, bunch of halves, some 10 milers, 10Ks, like all that. So the one distance that kind of like had eluded me or that I hadn't like gone after yet was 100 miles. So I have this couple who's an ultra running husband and wife couple in Lafayette, Louisiana, which is near where I'm from, Justin and Fawn. They're both incredible, like just, endurance beasts, right? So I was talking to Justin once and I said, dude, should I be worried that I haven't, come upon a 100-mile race that really gets me yet? because what I'm kind of like waiting for, I guess, is like just something to get me. Like I see a race and like that's the race. Like, it's just meant to be. So he said, you hit it right on the head. It's going to happen when you least expect it. Don't force the issue because it's such an undertaking. You're going to be going about your business, looking through, race websites or whatever, and one is just going to grab you. So, Arkansas Travel, I had heard about that race once before from my gentleman friend Jeff Brown. He hadn't run it, but I think he was interested, mildly interested in like 2021, and then he didn't end up signing up. So I'd heard about it, but I hadn't given it a lot of thought. Fast forward one year, the beginning of 2022, Fawn from that same husband and wife couple um, attempts and sets the female FKT of the entire Ouachita Trail. So the Ouachita Trail runs through Perryville, and actually the Arkansas Traveler 100 accessed it for only 12 miles. But it took her 4 days. She ran 222 miles, the entire Ouachita Trail. Now she owns that FKT. So I remember hearing about that, and like everything she does impresses the hell out of me, right? She and her husband. So I knew that. And then when maybe, I don't know how I stumbled back onto Arkansas Traveler though. So I guess I just discovered that this race was coming up and the timing would fit with, and it wasn't 2022. She did that in 2021. That's the only way that it would make sense. She did it in 2021, late 2021. I was looking for races. I stumble upon that. I read up about it. I see that a section of the Ouachita Trail that she had set the FKT on was on that course. And it was like a no brainer, right? I need 100. This looks beautiful. We used to travel. We used to like road trip when I was a kid to Little Rock and Eureka Springs and Hot Springs all the time. I know how beautiful the area is. There's like good climbing, like it's 12,000 feet of gain. It's going to test me on every level. She has this FKT. So like everything lined up like bam, 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 bam. So, I tried to register on the spot. It wasn't like open to me just yet. So I'd like check back obsessively, like, every couple of days, and it just wouldn't open up, wouldn't refresh. So I hit up this guy whose email I got off of the website, and he was like, "Sorry, I'm not the race director anymore. It should open up in February. Check back then." So then February would be about 6 months out. So yeah, the day that it opened up, I had set a notification on my phone.
Yeah.
So like the minute it opened, I got on there and I was like the third person in or something like that. So I had my sights set on it for a while, and just excited doesn't begin to give it justice.
Yeah, and I will say Arkansas Traveler 100, I heard about it. I've just seen it on Facebook from people I follow, and that will be my first 100-mile race. And because I go to school here in Arkansas, and it's a beautiful state. I feel like it's a hidden gem almost if you're not aware of it, which I wasn't growing up in Texas. And so um, the Arkansas Traveler 100 is one heck of a cool race. It has a lot of history. It's legit. It's some real stuff, and
Definitely.
it's just kind of overlooked sometimes by the mainstream running media. So sweet
I
race.
agree. No, I agree. Like everything you said about it is 100% true. It's like when I started to investigate, like I said, I called to mind those memories of childhood traveling with my family. And I remember how beautiful, like beautifully stunning the state is. But then everything about the race that you said too, like long running, it's like 30 plus years. Um, um, in existence, which is second only to Western states. So how more people don't know about it? You're right. Like I don't know either. And then the other thing that they said makes it very successful is like their aid station volunteer um, presence. It's just like no other. And dude, I can attest to that. Like all they wanted to do was make me happy, put a smile on my face, and make sure that I was good. Like one aid station, they were all dressed as pirates. I don't know why, but it was awesome.
That's pretty
One aid
sweet.
station, yeah, one aid station, they all had mullets, like some real, some wigs. But it's like, how can you not laugh like running up to that, like whether or not you just climbed for 17 miles, which was one of the case in one of the cases. But one of them, as I ran up, about 200 meters shy of the actual station, there was an older lady with a walkie-talkie. So as I ran up, she was like, "Is there anything specific that you want? Do you want mashed potatoes?" I was like, "Yes." Do you want Gatorade? Yes. Do you want a mashed potato and bacon burrito? I was like, "Absolutely, I do." So she got on the walkie-talkie, radioed it in. They had it hot and fresh, waiting for me when I got there. I was like, "Full service aid station? I'm a restaurateur. This is amazing." So I was like taking notes on hospitality and service. It was incredible.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. What'd your training look like for this race? You signed up for it? What'd that look like?
Well, to tell you the truth, the actual block didn't start until 4 months out, but I made kind of like a quiet commitment to myself to run 50 miles a week for 2022. So my volume of mileage was already like really, really good. So like I just had a pretty strong base level of fitness throughout the year. And everybody was saying, because I was signed up for so long and I was looking towards signing up for even longer. Like everybody asked me the same question, like, what is your training going to look like? What are you going to do differently? What are you going to do differently? And like, I felt kind of boring and I felt a little maybe naive because I'd never run 100 before. But I said, to tell you the truth, the outlook of my weeks is not going to change that much. Like I'm already running a lot of mileage, so my volume is good. I'm going to focus more on hills, so I'm going to get a lot of hill work, and intensity of my training will change a little bit. I knew I needed a couple of really long efforts, so I had a couple of 20 pluses, and then I want to simulate race conditions as best I could for at least one. So I planned my entire week up to this point. On Saturday, or I guess Friday night of that week, of the week in question, um, I was out of the door starting my watch at midnight. My group of buddies had a 20 miler planned starting at 5:45 a.m. that same morning. So my goal was um, to be good, um, ready to do a 20 miler with them 5 hours and 45 minutes after I started. So my goal was to like have a 50K in the bank, and then do 20 with them, finish with a 50-mile effort. And yeah, it everything lined up and I was able to do that. So that gave me a ton of confidence. That was only about 5 weeks from race day. Um, so just having that thing in the bank and like, think about it. Like I ran overnight. I accessed that Greenbelt Trail system, which I told you about. So 16 of those uh, initial 30 were trail miles, with a headlamp, with trekking poles, training with nutrition because I had to, and then, had my girlfriend roll up with a change of clothes and some road shoes. So after that first 50K, I put on the Mach fours and knocked out the rest of the run on the road, which was, a nice kind of like transition. But yeah, so some different things. But to tell you the truth, I felt like I remained in my wheelhouse the entire training, just doing what I liked, like high volume, and dynamic training.
Yeah, yeah, that's sweet, man. I think it's important, people that are training for 100 milers, that they do a 50-mile race. Like you said, at least 5 to 8 weeks out, just kind of prep your body for what's to come. And I see a lot of ultra runners do that. A lot of good 100-mile runners do that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
One of my main running buddies, this dude Leo, he runs 100, I guess, pretty much once a year, and he's kind of like infamous in our crew because he's done Rocky Raccoon 100. No, no, no. He's done Bandera 100K, followed by 3 weeks later Rocky Raccoon 100 miler, 2 years in a row.
wow.
So the second one of those, I crewed and paced him at Rocky. And dude, like, yeah, I'm not ready for all that. Like, he's just an animal. He's like a robot, just like banging it out. But in each of his 100-mile training blocks, he usually does two 50-kilometer runs and one 50-miler. And that's what works for him. So I had that in my head that I wanted to kind of like simulate that same type of aspect. So yeah,
Yeah,
that was my.
yeah, some solid training. And before you, so when you showed up to the race the day before, What was going through your head? What were the thoughts you were having?
Well, whether it be a road race or a trail race, like forget about the day prior. It's like I'm kind of obsessed, man. Like for
Yeah.
probably a week out, I'm not really thinking about anything else. Like I have like a lot of difficulty like focusing on anything other than the race coming up. It's like it just consumes me almost. Like, is that healthy? I don't really know. But personally, that's like how it is for me. So, my mind was occupied with race thoughts and, like thinking about mantras and, going over scenarios and like, thinking about the problem solving, aspect of races. And like, they say like a good thing to do is like take yourself through everything that could potentially go wrong and like where will my mind be and like what will I do and like where will I go mentally and those types of things. So just every aspect of the race had been going through my head for so long. When I got there, that's when I started to get excited. Up until that point it was like nerves, and I was kind of like yeah, just a little bit of a nervous wreck. But once the road trip started, my girlfriend and I drove out there. Once the road trip started, it started feeling really real. Um, so then I was just like starting to like have fun with it. It's like this is amazing. Like this is what everything is for. Like the culmination of all those training hours and early mornings and you know loss of toenails and all that all that stuff. It's like this is what it's for. So let's have fun with this, man.
Yeah. And what was that? What was the race morning like the next day when you woke up? And actually, before that, I want to know how many hours of sleep did you even get that night? And then tell us a little bit about race morning.
Cool. I had an amazing crew. My girlfriend crewed and paced. She paced the last 15 miles with me. She runs trails as well. Previous to her, I did 16 miles with my first cousin John, who drove in from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Before him, I did 20 miles with the gentleman Florian, who I mentioned from Ultra Expeditions. So I had amazing pacers, and then that dude Leo, who knocks out Rocky slash Bandera once a year. He was crew chief. So all these guys like made a really really long road trip to be with me. So I was real grateful to have their support and have their presence there. But I got an Airbnb. It sat right on a lake. It was like this little cabin, like very like idyllic and charming. So we were real comfortable. I packed a lot of food from home because like my diet is pretty regimented and I don't try to deviate from what I'm used to, that close to a race like that, especially. So I meal prepped. Like I had like, brown rice and roasted sweet potato and lots of kale and broccoli. And I brought some shrimp to cook. So I like cooked everybody these big rice bowls because that's how we eat, like typically like about 5 nights a week. So I didn't deviate. That's what we had the night before. My cousin was a little late getting into Arkansas. Like he wasn't able to leave Baton Rouge until about 1. So we didn't see him until 10 p.m. That was like a little late. Like I needed to be up at 3. So I was little concerned that I wasn't going to have quite enough, quite as much sleep as I wanted. But I was in bed by about 10:15. A little bit of nerves, as you can expect. Had everything laid out, like everything was like thought out and like ready for me. So that like I could like, feel good about that. Got to bed probably about 10:30, um, and I was like laying awake just waiting for my alarm at 3 a.m. So I probably had 5 hours of sleep. No, wait, that's shoddy math. Probably about four hours of sleep, which ended up being plenty. Woke up the next morning, had some coffee. Um, I can't remember. Oh, I had made some overnight oats. Oatmeal is like pretty substantial. Kind of rich, but I've tested with that before. I just needed something that would kind of like stick with me.
Yeah.
Um,
What kind
and
of
then
real quick, I'm a coffee drinker. What kind of coffee? How do you like your coffee?
uh, that I buy whole bean here in Austin. There's a coffee shop that roasts their beans called Greater Goods.
Okay.
Greater Goods has a blend called AM Rescue, and it's literally one of the most delicious coffees I've ever had. So I had like fresh, roasted beans
Yeah.
that I ground here at home. Brought a little canister of that with us. So that part. I knew that, I wasn't gonna, be skimping on
Oh,
that.
yeah.
And then like a little bit of oat milk, a little bit of honey. That's how I take it.
Cool, man. That's sweet, man. So, you show up at the start line. What's going on?
Well, it's a little chilly.
Yeah.
So not bad though. It's nice race conditions. It was in the low 40s that morning.
Uh,
So like quite a disparity from what my training has looked like. Dude, like through the heat of the summer, it's like, I'm washing my shoes once a week because they're awful, and like all my clothes, like I do more laundry here than, any human should,
yeah.
just because like, I sweat through clothing like, 2, 3 times a day. So anyway, that was like a real nice shift, 40 degrees to start. But had a couple of layers on. Um, got the headlamp, got the, I don't take trekking poles on the first segment, so I don't have to worry about carrying anything. I'm wearing a vest, so there's no handheld, so my hands are free, which is like pretty liberating, right? And a little bit of pre race jitters, but it's like I said, it's like at this point I'm ready, man. Like I know that I'm physically where I need to be. Like mentally, I feel like there's going to be some discoveries made in this race because I've never tackled this distance before. But like, bottom line is like I feel good about where I am, man, and like yeah, it's been a lot of training and a lot of hours, and I'm ready to put it to work. That's where I was mentally. I'm just ready to get it done. You know.
Yeah. And give us a little overview of the race experience itself, your biggest takeaways, maybe some people you've ran into, uh, any crazy stories you might have. Let's hear about the race itself.
Sure. Well, when I rattled off my crew, the gentleman that I forgot was my buddy Elmer, who also came out. Like he kind of like shifted, inserted himself right into the crew, which was great. He's a runner as well, but he's also kind of like um, up and coming movement photographer. So he brought his rig, he brought his mountain bike. We didn't really know what that was going to look like with like race rules, because I certainly don't want to have anybody out there on the course with me who could kind of be looked at as like, some type of support, maybe not pacing like we think of pacing, but I just didn't want there to be, any problem, right? So he let me start the first segment and got on his mountain bike and like popped onto the trail later on and got some good shots of me, which was nice. But the race experience, like I said, I was just ready to go. And like I said, I'm um, I'm a little bit of a cerebral guy out there, like whether it's on the road or the trail. So no headphones, no music, anything like that. Like I really like to be tuned in and just be in the moment. Like I love the Rich Roll podcast. I thought Courtney Dauwalter on Rich Roll was an amazing interview. She said something, she phrased it a little differently, and I know that like the message of it is a little overused and cliche. Like people say, "Run the mile, you're in," right? She said, um, "Sorry." She said, "Be right where your feet are." And I just think about that a lot. In a race like this, it's like I could get really like wound up about um, the distance total or how intimidating 100 miles is or the vert of this race
Yeah.
or what that hill in front of me looks like. I really tried to um, take that to heart and put it into action, you know, and, you know, headphones and stuff like that. Like I get why people use those things because they distract you. Like I want to be in the moment. There's there's rewards that come from that, but there's also challenges that come from that. Okay, so anyway, the race was fantastic. Okay, so I had a really um, definitive nutrition plan. Let me tell you real quick. I joined Robbie Ballinger. I don't know if you know that name, but he's an ultra runner who lives in Colorado now with his wife Shelly. He did a transcontinental run about 4 years ago, and immediately following that is when I met him. He's a Texas guy, but he lives in Colorado now. Anyway, his most recent extreme endurance challenge was racing the battery life of a Tesla.
That was big. A lot
Yeah,
of people talked about that.
so I got a chance to pace him for like 60 miles of that. He did 242 miles in like 3.5 days or something like crazy like that. But anyway, like while I was there, we were chatting and, like running beside each other, but I was constantly watching. I was constantly looking. I was constantly listening. So, this dude is like doing the deal. And I want to be on his level one day. So I'm like watching what he eats. I'm like paying attention to when he eats. I'm asking him questions. Like I'm inquisitive as hell. I'm a student of the game, man. Like I want to know all this stuff. So anyway, he gave me some really, really good tips. First of which was, taking calories every hour on the hour, regardless of how you feel. So that was one of my plans. So I used Spring Energy gels. I used some Martin gels, and then other than those two things, solid food. I see too many people I think out there like solely reliant on the gels, and I just didn't want that to affect my stomach in any way. So I always had those on my pack, and I had enough to where I could eat one every hour on the hour, and I never deviated, even when I was 3 miles from the finish. I was like, I'm not gonna bonk like on the final stretch. Like, there's no way that I'm going to do that. So I took one like, less than the 3 miles left. So anyway, ate a gel every hour, and I ate solid food at every aid station when I wanted to, but I ate solid food every single time I saw my crew, which was between 15 and 20 miles. It averaged about 17 miles. So solid food then. Um, but the course was challenging. Like I knew that it had 12,000 miles of gain, 12,000 feet of gain, but man, it really, really felt like all 12,000 were in the first 50. So it's like the first half of this race is done, and like, man, like I've climbed a lot. So I see my crew at 31 miles. I'm able to pick up a pacer at 48 miles. So I have 17 miles between that time. Those 17 miles between 31 and 48, I'm not kidding. I climbed the entire time. Like it was a 17-mile hill that just never stopped. This dude Elmer, who came out with his camera, was on his mountain bike, and he mountain biked that section. And after that, I didn't see him again. He was like, "I'm in a crew, man. I'm done. I'm done, dude. That was too hard." So anyway, like it was just incredibly challenging. Like asking about the race experience, it was like it tested me on every level. I brought out some carbon fiber trekking poles, and that really, really helped me like dig in and grind on those ups,
Yeah.
easily collapsible, and I was able to cruise on the flats and the downs. There weren't a lot of flats. There really, really weren't a lot of flats. But obviously, if you're climbing, 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 there's going to be some descents. So just I remember at 70 miles in, I told Leo, the crew chief, I was like, I have no business feeling as good as I feel right now. Like I really, really thought it would have gone sideways, because I've been to races. I've seen it happen other way. He was like, dude, lean into that. Like, don't question it. Just enjoy it. So sure enough, like the race, finished, and I still felt relatively good. The kookiest thing was on that 12 miles of Ouachita Trail. I just kind of like accessed that trail system. It was gorgeous. I wish there would have been more of that. That would be my only kind of like, not really a request because it is what it is, but that would be my only wish because that was so beautiful and so technical and so perfect of a trail. Um, I was about 3/4 of a mile past the last aid station. I round this corner on the Ouachita Trail, and there was like this vintage suitcase just sitting on the side of the trail with this big ass speaker on top, like unattended. There's nobody out there. And it was like bumping 9 to 5 by Dolly Parton, like so random. And I just loved it. Like I laughed out loud. There was like a guy about 20 feet in front of me and a dude about like, I don't know, 100 feet behind me. And I didn't care like what they thought. I just laughed, out loud. And it was just so random and cool and funny. So I thought about that the rest of the way. And then, like I said, other than that, like aid stations, um, obviously running with my pacers was cool and like, memorable. But those aid station volunteers, man, it's like they were just really, really going out of their way, to make sure I was taken care of, and there was a smile on my face, and I was so appreciative.
Oh, that's sweet, man. So how'd you feel when you got that buckle at the end?
Oh, well, my primary goal for the race was to finish 100 miles, man. It's
Yeah.
like I wasn't gonna put myself in a position of peril trying to chase a time. And people who know me didn't really believe me, because like if you come for a run with me, I'm like, chill, man. We're gonna chill. We're gonna totally take a chill. And then all of a sudden, like we're running kind of fast, and that's like a natural tendency of mine. But in the few ultras that I've done. Um, I've gone into it in a disciplined way and like really, really measured my output in a way that I'm able to finish strong. So whether it's like a 5K road race, a 400 meter, lap on a track or
Yeah.
a 100 mile run, my goal is always going to be the same: run a smart race, put myself in a position to finish strong. That's what I want more than anything. It's like if I do that, I think the time will probably reflect it, but I'm not going to say, dude, I want that buckle. I want sub 24. I want sub 24. Like, believe me, I wanted to run a sub 2400, but it's like I wasn't going to let it consume me. So, primary goal, finish this race, run a smart race, finish strong. Secondary goal, do it in under 24 hours.
And you did that. You
So,
did 22, right?
22:43.
Oh,
But it's like I wasn't trying to pace to get that.
yeah.
Like, I was running a race that put me in a position to be there, but it's like I wasn't running, running, trying to do it. Like, I ran a good race and it ended up being like a favorable time. But man, I didn't know with certainty that I had that thing in the bag until like aid station way late. As I was leaving, I was like, "Hey, 153 out." That was my bib number. As I was coming in, 153 in, they jotted it down because they were like super old school, right? They'd manually input. There was no chips or anything like that. It was super cool.
I like
And
that.
then,
Yeah.
yeah, it was neat, kind of like grassroots. And then as I was out, 153 out. So the lady, in response to 153 out, was, "Go get your buckle." I was like, "Well, if she's confident that I'm going to do it, I probably will." So, but then, like, crossing the finish and seeing the time is like, I was incredibly pleased, like very, very proud. And I had the crew there waiting for me to share that with them, and um, couldn't wait to get on the phone and call my dad. He was going to be awake in a couple of short hours. So just a lot of things going through my head at that point, like all amazing things.
Yeah. And I just want to congratulate you, man. You're one of the first. I believe you were one of the first Texas runners to finish, and you weren't too far from first place. First place was, I think, 19 hours, and so you're pretty good up there as far as placement and all that. And after that race, I mean, it's been a couple days since that race. How's your body feeling right now?
I'm moving around pretty good,
Uh,
pretty well today. As you can imagine, like, immediately following the race, they were offering warm bags of IV fluids, so which was really nice because it was cold, right? And like my body equilibrium and temperature is so out of whack when I finish those races, and it was cold, so you get that like jackhammer shivers start to go. So I had to bundle up, but then they stuck me with a needle and pumped these like warm fluids into me, and it like made me nice and toasty, right? So we had some breakfast there on site, and then by then it's like, once you sit for any length of time at all, like your body just starts to seize. So walking back to the car was like painful. Getting back to the Airbnb was rough. Like I sat by the fireplace and like just warmed my body before like I could even think of taking a shower. I wanted to wash the 100 miles of grit and grime and dirt off my body so bad, but I was just like literally fearful of getting in the shower because I was just so cold. So anyway, I sat by the fire for, I don't know, a good like hour and a half, like all bundled up, cup of coffee, like the whole deal. Finally felt warm enough to get up, and dude, getting out of that chair was like, I mean, it was comical. Like, I mean, my body was like just felt kind of wrecked. But then, you know, um, surprisingly enough, like even by the next day, which was, well, I mean, it was early Sunday, so later Sunday. By Monday, when we had to load the car and get back on the road, like, I was, walking back and forth from the Airbnb to the car, not like, fully normal, but the healing process was pretty quick. I had a little bit of swelling in my lower leg on the left, but I've been icing it and elevating it. I did some sauna slash cold plunge slash compression therapy yesterday at this little clinic here in Austin. And I think that kind of like expedited the process. But dude, I've been focusing on like fluids, healthy food, and lots of rest. Like, I scheduled myself favorably with the job. I'm not back until tomorrow. So I'll be walking pretty normally by then and like feeling like, you know, a normal human being, pretty much. But, just like focusing on all the right things, man, giving myself time.
yeah, man. I appreciate you sharing your story and everything you said. I feel like a lot of people listening are going to get a lot of value out of what you've had to say. And what advice do you have for people listening And what advice do you have for people that are going to run the Arkansas Traveler in 2023?
Well, we'll start with the Traveler. My advice would be like, do it. It's just such a great race. Like, it's such a great race. It's a beautiful race. All the reasons that it's been going for 30 years, like, it makes perfect sense, right? It's just really, really well put on. The people there behind the scenes, it's just incredible. Man, do hill work. Knock out those hills, man, because there's more climbing than, like I said, I knew the vert, I knew the total, but it's like the way that it's structured, it's like it will test you. So just get on those hills and do those reps. That would be my advice. For runners in general, for a long time, running was just mine, and like that's where I planted my flag. It's like, that's my time, that's like me, and every once in a while I would sync up with my buddy Jeff Brown and we'd knock out a 20 or a long run, but it was only me all the time. um, like, I guess my advice to runners would be, find community. um, Connections made in running, like, I think, are some of the most profound and significant that I've made in my lifetime. And I always heard my dad say the same thing, which is why he formed a club of his own, which is why he was always out running with other guys. And for me, I just never found that aspect of the running. But it was just mine all the time, mine, like almost possessive of it. But man, once I kind of like got out there and started to connect with people, dude, it was just a completely different thing. And it took on like this whole new meaning for me, you know? So that would be my advice. Connect with other runners.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think whenever I ask, or I think most shows we have with people on this, or guests on the show that we have, uh, a lot of them say, community, and it really is such a big part of running. And so I appreciate, the advice that you gave to the runners and all your time and everything. Before we wrap this up, where can people find you on social media?
I'm on Instagram. My handle is JRobes, JROWBS. My last name is spelled like Robert, but it's Cajun French, Robert. So, short version of that, JRobes. There's a link to Commodore Run Club on my page. There's also a link to my restaurant, Fix Southern House. My three loves, right?
Yeah.
Running, the restaurant, maybe just two. Again, shoddy math. But anyway, like, that's, I'm no influencer. So I want to like offer a disclaimer. It's like, you'll see posts and stories and things like that, but I'm not one of these guys that's like, always, I could do a little bit better about my presence. But anyway, that's where I am, and you know, love for people to take a look. And this was really great.
All right, everybody. That was a great episode. James, Robert, if you're listening, thank you so much, man, for just all the great conversations and all the lessons that we were able to learn from you. Thank you all for listening. We have a way to where you can subscribe to the show if you want to keep listening. We do a show like this every month. It comes out on a Saturday with a guest, and every Monday we release a Shooting the Bull episode. And so check that stuff out, y'all, if y'all want to keep on listening to our podcast. And make sure y'all leave a rating if y'all enjoyed the episode. And I think that's all I got. And I'll see you guys on Monday if you're listening to this early. And so that's enough of that. Y'all have a good one.